Hi, I'm Tony Paine, I'm the CEO of Victim Support. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of Victim Support here in New Zealand, supporting victims of crime and trauma across the country.
What is Victim Support?
Well, Victim Support, we're an NGO that started 26 years ago. We started when a police officer in Gisborne by the name of Kevin Joblin, who was in the court, noticed that victims of crime were kind of lost and a little bit bewildered and no one was looking after them. And so he encouraged volunteers in his community to come and help support those people. And from there, that idea of people within the communities of New Zealand supporting victims of crime and other trauma like accidental death or completed suicide, providing some support for those people as they deal with that. And that's what we've been doing for the last 25 years.
So what different things does your organisation do?
Well, Victim Support is co-located with the New Zealand Police, so we have 65 officers up and down the country and about 150 paid staff and about 1,100 volunteers who are available 24/7, 365 days of the year, largely when the police ask us to get involved in the sort of things they are dealing with, to come and provide emotional and practical support to people dealing with things like crime or the other sorts of trauma that police deal with, like, as I say, things like suicide and accidental death. And our services, I guess you could divide our services into three chunks if you like. The first one is crisis support. So if you've just been told very bad news about the death of a loved one, or you've been involved in something very serious yourself, chances are you'll be in shock, you'll be experiencing trauma, a very unpleasant time for you and your family, and we can provide some, what you might call emotional first aid, to go along with any physical first aid that you might, just looking after people in those settings, helping them understand what's going on for them, helping them deal with the often very overwhelming feelings that event precipitates for a family. Then there's some ongoing support. We can help people as they move through that time of crisis, help them get their lives back on track in a variety of ways, either through emotional support, practical support, just helping them sort out the details of what they need to do, whether it's a locksmith or a funeral or any number of things that we can help people do in the community. Help link people to other services like counselling services or health services, or even other supports in the community like church groups or sports clubs or whatever, and then advocate on behalf of people in case when they bump into the system, as often they do when their rights are somewhere being eroded. And then the third and really important chunk of our work is supporting people as they deal with the justice system. So helping them deal with the police and the court system and other parts of the justice system like the parole board. We actively support people, help them understand their expectations, what they might get from that process, and be with them as they're doing that, and often help them with financial support to help them pay for the costs of doing that as well. So a kind of suite of support across that period from the time of the crisis, the time of the crime, right through to what might be 10 years down the track when the parole board is considering the crime they're having someone.
So what support do you offer and to what specific victims?
Well, I guess at the heart of what we offer is simply well-trained people being available to help you as a victim, a family as a victim, to sit down and think about what their needs are, and they will be many and varied depending on what's happened to them, and help think about how we can help you meet them and how you can get those needs met through other people. So that's kind of at the heart of the matter, and that's something we can do for you, as I say, 24/7, 365 days of the year, pretty much anywhere in New Zealand. And we have a memorandum of understanding with the police that requires us to be on the road within 45 minutes of them referring a case to us. So no matter what's happened, we can be there for people. And often the support is just around listening to people, letting them tell us their story, reassuring them that the emotions they're feeling are very normal and very understandable, and then providing them with information. And people have a huge number of questions, ranging from quite practical questions, so when will the body come back, or what's a depositions hearing, or how does this stuff all work, through to more sort of deep questions about why did this happen to us, and how will I get my life back on track. So help people get the information they need to answer those questions and to understand how the system's going to respond to them. So that's kind of the support that we provide. Now the question about who we provide it to is two things. One is almost all of our work is referred to us by the police. So we deal with the people the police deal with, either victims of crime or victims of other tough stuff that the police deal with in terms of disasters and other things involving accidental death, for example. And while we place a priority, for example, on things involving death, we also say that we're interested in your need, not the incident itself, because we've met people who've been experienced, for example, a relatively so-called minor crime, who've been deeply upset by it. So an elderly person living alone might be quite upset by noises in the neighbourhood or the letterbox being pushed over by some students or whatever, and still be quite traumatised by that. So we want to be available for that, even though in the scheme of things that is a relatively minor crime. So we're guided more by need than incident. And in the course of the year, we provide some support to around about 50,000 people a year. And that will range from some quite brief support through to quite long-term work with people.
Do you find any issues with being so closely affiliated with the police?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. The first thing is, we're very conscious that there are a large group of people who don't report crime to the police, and for a variety of reasons, including that they're too scared to do that, or that they don't trust the police, or they don't have a good relationship with the police, or they don't believe the police will be helpful. And we have very little to do with those people. I think that's a gap. It's certainly a gap. It's not one that we have any bright ideas about how to fill, but it's certainly a gap. And that is, I guess, part of the compromise of us being so closely involved with the police. And I think the other thing is that oftentimes people will have a sense of caution around the police because they are seen as being the guardians of law and order, and people may or may not have had positive experiences of them. But we will often work with people in their own homes or meet them in a cafe or something like that, and I think that partially overcomes that. So yes, I think there are some downsides to that, but there are also some positive things to that, and as much as we can be available to people right at the time of the crisis, and they can be responding alongside the police or just coming in behind them, that's a very important time to be providing support to people.
Carrying on from that, do you offer any sort of support for the victims you could class as sort of, I guess they're tertiary victims, sort of like the offender's family and things like that?
No, we don't. Although the only exception to that is where we might, for example, if a crime happens within a family, and the family are both the offender's family and also victims. And we keep that separation, and I realise that that's it's a kind of thing that's worth debating, but we keep that separation particularly because, for example, you can imagine us supporting someone in a courtroom where there's often tension between the victim's family and the offender's family. We couldn't really set ourselves alongside both those families. So we say our priority is victims. There are other organisations who are available to help and support offenders' families. Salvation Army springs to mind. We want to focus on the offenders' families. And as I say, sometimes there's a bit of a grey area in between where the same people will be involved in both sides of the equation. And we attempt to navigate that as, in terms of the particular thing that we're dealing with.
Okay. So how specifically are you funded as an organisation?
About 80% of our money comes from the government, so we have contracts with the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Health for our work around suicide, and MSD for our work around disasters like Christchurch earthquakes and so forth. And we're also appropriated by the government to pay grants to victims, so there's a range of government grants that are available to help victims of crime deal with the justice system or go to counselling and things like that. We evidence to get from the Crown. The rest of our money, like all non-government organisations, comes from the usual charitable fundraising stuff, which we do up and down the country, and that's everything from sausage sizzles to major appeals, and we rely on community support as much as we do on taxpayer support.
Yep. Is there any research you think needs to be undertaken in the victimisation area?
I think because victim experience is very diverse, and no two victims will give you the same set of experiences, even if they're dealing with a very similar crime. So I think understanding what victims need and want is still a very challenging thing to be able to do, other than sitting and talking to an individual or a family. So I think there's still a lot of scope to hear what victims are saying in general. I think there's some good research that Ministry of Women's Affairs did around the needs of survivors of sexual violence, for example, and things that help them get their lives back on track. That was very powerful research, I think, and we've done a bit of similar work around homicide, and I think that sort of research, which guides the services Victim Support does, for example, very, very helpful to the system to be able to get a better handle on that. And that's not going to be easy stuff, but it's very important stuff.
So are there any ways that the public could help out after watching this video? Any volunteer opportunities?
Absolutely. As I said, Victim Support, our workforce is largely volunteers, and we rely on the goodwill of good people up and down the country to make this all possible. So we're always very interested in hearing about people who think they might be able to do this work. It's not for everyone, but if you do think that you've got the skills and the abilities to support people after traumatic events, we're keen to hear from you. The best way to get in touch with us is to go to our website, victimsupport.org.nz, and there's a whole section on there that you can click on and look at volunteering and even apply to join our volunteering program. We provide very comprehensive training and supervision for people, and in return expect you to hop on the roster and do some of that work with the people in your community. So we'd love to hear from people who'd like to be part of that wonderful work.
So are there any general messages you have for the victims of crime?
Well, look, I think the big message from Victim Support is you're not alone. You don't have to go through these terrible things by yourself and unsupported. If you do think that victim support can help, the best thing to do is call our 0800 number, which is 0800 842 846 24/7, and there'll be someone on the end of the phone who can talk with you about what you need, point you in the right direction and provide you with some support.